While I was going through the process of getting the engine fitted into the bus, I was thinking about some of the other tasks that needed doing, and one of those was the fuel tank. If you remember back to part 1, I explained that the existing fuel tank had a hole. While I was taking parts off the truck for the engine, I had a moment of clarity. I should just use the fuel tank from the truck. It's much bigger and doesn't have a hole, so that's a bonus. I carefully measured it to make sure it would fit, and everything seems okay. So I proceeded to remove the tank and the brackets as well. One strange thing I came across is that I could hear something was moving about inside. So using a light and a magnet, I found this hacksaw blade. Very strange indeed. Now before I install this tank, I wanted to straighten up the side of the bus. It looks like it's taken a side impact at some point, and the angle iron seems severely bent. Now I tried using a jack to bend it back into shape. It kind of worked, but it wasn't very safe, and I could see a serious injury coming on. When it was lying on its side, the jack was much safer, but it stopped working properly. Seems like these types of jacks only work in the standing up position. I then tried the scissor jack from my Nissan Navara Ute, and this worked quite nicely. Ultimately, to completely straighten it out, I would probably be better to cut it out and replace the bent steel. I'm not that fussed. I was more taking the opportunity to bring it back in line while I had the fuel tank out. The bottom sheet metal needed to be folded back flat as well. So I first used a hammer to bend it up, then vacuumed the dirt before using a small vise to crimp it back in place. This took a bit of time, but eventually it looked nicer than what it was before I started. With that done, I next needed to drill new holes for the fuel tank brackets. I made a template up that had the existing holes laid out on it, and I could drill the pilot holes first before drilling the larger holes. I spent a fair amount of time making sure everything was aligned before drilling the first hole. I use this 10mm piece of steel that has a hole already drilled into it and clamp it on top of the template. This stops the drill bit from wandering while I drill the hole. I'm not a huge fan of drilling holes in metal by hand. I much prefer using a drill press, but in this situation it's not possible. I repeat this process for the remaining holes, only 3 in total as I'm using an existing hole in the chassis. Once they are done, I then go up a size and drill bit and re-drill them larger, and then once more at the final drill bit size. With the holes now drilled, I mount the bracket temporarily to make sure it fits, and it all seems perfect. I of course repeated the process for the other bracket. The way the brackets work, I need them to hang loose on the tank while I get it in place. I've used my Ute scissor jack to raise it in place, but as you can see the bracket for the mudguard is in the way. So I need to raise it in on an angle over that bracket first. With that hurdle overcome, I now need to bolt the tank brackets to the chassis, while at the same time clamping the top strap down. This was a frustrating process, but eventually it all came together and fit in place. I also connected the fuel pipe that runs to the engine and the ground wire for the gauge. The tank will be wired up later on when I do the electrics for the bus. Now let's have a look at it from the outside. Clearly, the existing fuel cap hole does not line up with the new hole. However, this is something I will do at a later stage. I want to install a flap that has a key lock, but I didn't have time to source this part. Coincidentally, this leads us into the next episode where I install the exhaust. And honestly, this is the other reason why I did the fuel tank first, as the exhaust would have been in the way otherwise. Thanks for hanging out and watching my progress. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.